So, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. It is a challenge to speak last, particularly after all these very good speakers, and also the fact that we had a very active audience. I deliberately, therefore, did not prepare any slides so that I could build on what's been said and not been said. Certain topics may have been exhausted or they've been covered. So I'm going to reflect a little bit more of what we heard in the introduction today about, more of philosophy and mindset and attitudes towards collaborating with one another. I've been in the industry a long time. I've never seen our researchers more excited about science than they are today. It's very clear. At the same time, we're all frustrated about, is there a market there and will someone pay for it? But again, that's a separate discussion. But I've also seen over these years in the industry is a clear change in mindset, in attitude, among researchers, among developers, and among executives in the industry. And I just want to illustrate that with one example. Michelle mentioned the antibiotics program we have. And we started 5 years ago to discuss within EFPIA, what can we do about this? There's a problem that not enough companies are still in this field of antibiotics research. How can we bring people back? So I gathered a few of our still active companies in a room, and they shared their experience. And next to me was sitting one of the heads of anti-infectious research for one of our companies. So he was sitting there, and he wasn't really, he's not very keen on this IMI stuff. He wasn't really, collaboration, because he wanted to do his own thing. And as long as he could convince the CEO to give him some more money, he would deliver. But then as he listened to his colleagues, and there was one colleague up there presenting some slide on some research they've done. They've been down looking at gyrase inhibitors, and she was talking about this. And the guy sitting next to me was whispering and saying, "Richard, my God, we've done all that. I've done all of that, and it failed. It's all a waste." So listening to 3 or 4 of these presentations, my friend spontaneously said loudly, so everyone heard it, "Guys, we're not going to make it unless we pool everything we have." This guy got it like that. Suddenly, he realized that this is not going to work because of this threat we have. So suddenly, in the eyes of a threat, which is not having any antibiotics, and this is what's been happening now across, I think, other therapeutic areas as well, that people get this, that we can be much, much more productive and effective on delivering on the excitement, if we just work together. This is compatible with the fundamental business model, which is that we are rewarded for winning. You don't give state subsidies to people that you don't know whether they will work or not. The whole business model is that you have intellectual property rights that are worth something if you're successful. If you're not successful, they're not worth anything. So that model is still valid and should be defended and explained to people. But you can still collaborate more with one another. The other things that have changed in mindset, or what people have realized, is that we have moved to areas which are much more difficult. We've entered therapeutic areas where we weren't before. Autism. There's no development pathway. You have to build the road in front of you. And that you cannot do alone. You have to do that with the regulators, with everyone else, with the clinical community, patient group. So we've entered fields that are entirely new. Regenerative medicine, charged with all sorts of ethical concerns and religion and everything. If you want to work on that, you better do it together with other people to make sure that you have somewhat of a predictable outcome. So predictability is everything, of course, in an industry which is living on borrowed money, whether it's from our own financial guys or from our pension funds. Similarly, there was an interesting paper by an Italian economist, Fabio Pamolli, 2 years ago in Nature, I believe, and he showed, and he has this huge database with all the projects over decades in the companies, and data on commercial successes and data on publications and patents and so on. And he puts all this together. I'm just a simple pharmacist. I don't understand the mathematics here. But somehow something comes out which at least convinced the peer reviewers that it was okay. And he concluded that it was not a surprise there was a dip in the number of new chemical entities coming through the industry. Now we saw the FDA slide sort of encouragingly going up. There's a reason for that, is that industry has moved from areas where it was easy to areas where it's more difficult. Now you may ask yourself, why is an industry doing that? Are they looking for failures? Well, but you all know this, that the whole business model is about meeting unmet medical need. So we have been moving to areas that are much more difficult. So moving to areas that are much more difficult, maybe we need to collaborate more. So back to this antibiotics case I made. So this is very much the spirit that I can feel when I meet my members. Now there's another trend which is partly unfortunate because it affects people's jobs, and that is that there is an externalization of the R&D model going on. So we let people go that work in our in-house labs, but the money is still going to be spent on R&D. You know, we spend more than 110 billion euros every year on research and development worldwide, a third of it here in Europe. And that is projected to go up by analysts and others. So it's not that we're spending less on research, but we're not spending it in-house so much, we're spending it more outside. One of my CEOs is my incoming president, Chris Wiebacher from Sanofi. He shocked a few colleagues last year in an interview when he said that the best brains are no longer in the industry, he said. And Harvard Business Review did a profile on him because of that, because he was criticizing his own people. That was not his point. His point was that, you know, we've figured out that we need to work in a different way with academia, with smaller companies, and there is an ecosystem here that Alistair talked about, and that I'll come back to at the end in a few minutes. So there is this big trend of outsourcing is not the right word, actually. This is not outsourcing about telling someone to do a trial for you. That happens too. But this is about a collaborative model. This is about a whole different type of research collaboration. Now, none of this is surprising in a way. What I describe now, that an industry is changing like this, is not surprising, because any academic research on competitiveness, so competitiveness of companies or competitiveness of nations or regions, I mean, like people like Michael Porter and others, that research on competitiveness and systems of innovation, they move away from the notion of supply and demand. You know, the R&D is all about just churning things out, and demand is just the market. No, it's an ecosystem. It's a continuous feedback loop. And the environments and the companies that are successful in this are those that manage this ecosystem. Either they have it in-house because they're so big, you know, take Apple or something, or some of my members. But increasingly, my members are converting themselves to be a hub or a financer, maybe, of such an ecosystem, which is about developing medicines. Not surprisingly, many of the technological breakthroughs we've seen, even outside medicines, have been thanks to various types of collaborative programs, public-private partnerships, standardization, involvement of regulators. I'm Swedish, as you can tell from my accent and name. In the Nordic countries, we pioneered mobile telephones. We had the GSM standard set very early, which still used. Okay? That was a collaborative effort between governments in the Scandinavian region, the Nordic region, and the industry and academia. That was a public-private partnership. There are other examples in space, in aviation, GPS, everywhere, you know, examples of this. I think that there is a lot of historical precedents for industries also converting themselves more into ecosystems and collaborative approaches. And this is where big pharma is converting itself into a different type of animal, and that's what we're seeing. Let me finish with one final reflection on these ecosystems, and that is that maybe the most important thing is that everyone in this ecosystem recognizes their role in the ecosystem. The payers, I have to come back to them, for instance, not only them. And I'll share an experience with you. When I was in Sweden, I served on the board of the Karolinska Institute for several years, appointed by the Swedish government. To me, as an industry person, coming in, being in an academic environment was extremely interesting. I learned a lot from that. And I was told many times, Richard, this is not a company. This is a university. You can't say like that. Anyhow, what we clearly learned in the Stockholm region, Stockholm-Uppsala region, which I think you would agree with me is a fairly successful cluster in life science research. Okay? What we learned is that the biggest problem we had was maybe not money, but it was about the attitudes and the mindsets of all the people we depended on. So we had the Karolinska Institute as a university. We also have a hospital called the Karolinska University Hospital. It's not the same. That's owned by the local government. What are they measured on? production of healthcare. So when we the university side with our professors, and maybe many of our staffers had two jobs or two hats. So they were working in the hospital and they were working in the university. And this was sort of, and for you outside of Sweden, it's all Karolinska, isn't it, right? But to make sure that everyone in this organization, in this ecosystem, reporting to different people, realize that they have three jobs. They all should be measured on research, they all measured on education, and they all measured on producing high-quality healthcare. And everyone needs to be measured on all of them somehow. And unless you get this right, you're not going to get this virtuous circle. And all of this would also result in spin-off small companies, investments from Pfizer, AstraZeneca, you get even collaboration with NIH and others. So this whole ecosystem has to function and everyone has to see their role. Okay? And I would leave that as the final comment, again, that the pharmaceutical industry is increasingly starting to see this ecosystem and equipping itself to be a big player in this ecosystem, ultimately for the benefit of future patients. Thank you all.